Hi, I'm Jack, and we are the Wicked Whisperers. Our team consists of Anjum, Harvins, Lee, and Jenny, and obviously myself. Whilst each of us will take on whatever task necessary to get the job done, over the course of 10 weeks, and in order to meet the project deadline, specific roles were assigned. As part of this project on how to reduce household waste and increase sustainable consumption, our idea is to make adjustable garden pots using the metal coat hangers that you get from your dry cleaners and teaming it up with used plastic bags. And research to date shows that there is nothing like this currently on the market. The key concept is the garden pot will grow with your plant. Let's check out a quick 20-second video that we made to help you visualize. But before we watch the clip, it is important to note that for this stage of the design thinking process, our primary purpose is to gauge the customer's views on our conceptual idea of the adjustable garden pot. The aesthetics surrounding product prototype would follow a similar process regarding customer feedback before official market launch. So let's see if I can get this video to play. So plastic bags and metal coat hangers can be easily manipulated. The basic concept of our garden pot is that we will start with the shape 1 there, and as the plant grows, the pot can be adjusted to shape 2, as you can see on the right. The plastic bags will either be weaved or plaited into the metal frame to hold the soil and the plant. So how do we come up with this idea? Well, by empathizing and identifying a real customer problem that we ourselves experienced, and that problem was excess plastic bags and metal coat hangers just lying around the house. In trying to solve this problem using the design thinking process, divergent and convergent thinking was used throughout the brainstorming process and resulted in our minimum viable product and our subsequent value proposition. Our product would overcome the need to buy replacement pots, whilst at the same time addressing and reducing an element of the wicked problem of household waste. Did you know that worldwide, 100 tonnes of metal coat hangers are dumped into landfills every year, and that it takes more than 100 years for it to dispose in those landfills? And as for plastic bags, less than 1% of total consumption, which is 5 trillion bags globally, is recycled. And in Australia, it is estimated that 3.76 billion bags of plastic disposed of in landfill sites every year. So that's 429,000 recyclable plastic bags that are put into landfills every hour. Also, after watching the ABC series War on Waste, which highlighted the alarming amounts of plastic bags not being recycled and either ending up in landfills or our oceans, and also touched on states finding loopholes in new laws aimed at reducing use of plastic bags, well, this further motivated us and our business model. So this was our group's initial BMC, based on our initial idea. And the research that really influenced our minimum viable product and subsequent business model canvas were Michael Porter's concept of customer shared value. This helped us decide on a for-profit venture, as it's more likely to be sustainable over a longer term, given under the customer shared value concept, all parties benefit because it's a capitalist methodology. The story of stuff, which discussed planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence, thereby motivating us to create something that was durable with minimal carbon footprint. The lean startup, the key concepts of having something that was customer focused from the very inception, something that was agile and appealing, was appealing in that if our selected idea failed, we could quickly adapt or change our concept. So using this lean startup concept, we decided on our MVP, minimum viable product. We wanted to create something that could be used by everyone, appeal to the masses from our increasing aging population through to school children, and not just be restricted to the tech savvy. Once we decided, we took our product concept to the market, and that basically meant that we just went outside of our houses and started asking family and friends, members of the community, on their insight on our MVP. This feedback was all collated and reviewed under the design thinking process. So this is just a small sample of ideas that were generated by our team following the early customer engagement. And this slide attempts to highlight the ideation and visual thinking elements of the design thinking process. This slide will aim to show you how we use the design thinking process that we've touched on throughout the presentation so far to get to our value proposition. So as you saw in slide 3, we tried to think about the problem from the customer's perspective, drawing on our own experiences. Does the value proposition solve real customer problems? Well, we believe it does based on our own experiences. We underwent the ideation process where we brainstormed to generate ideas, as you could see from the previous slide, and from which we synthesized all those ideas down into one option. The visual thinking process was again highlighted in the previous slide by sketching out our brainstorming sessions where we're always able to easily refer to a certain point during discussions. And we also implemented a version of prototyping, as you'll see in the next slide, where we made changes to our BMC using learnings and feedback. So based on our initial idea of manufacturing adjustable garden pots from 100% recycled materials, we came up with our first value proposition, and that was adjustable pot plant holders made from recyclable coat hangers and plastic bags. This clearly defined the product we wanted to deliver. However, after viewing Steve Rankel's video on the value proposition, we realised that this did not exactly have the seat of the pants effect. We needed to see the product from the customer's perspective and rephrase the value proposition so that it not only captured our customer's problem of unwanted coat hangers and plastic bags, but it also expressed how we intended to tackle this issue, bearing in mind the wicked problem we're addressing in a short, succinct manner that our target customers can easily relate to. We also realised that pot plant holders did not describe the product we have in mind, as it gives the impression that the product is designed to hold a plant pot, but our product is meant to replace the pot, as it is intended to hold the plant and grow with it, therefore eliminating the need for the customer to replant as the plant grows. So we updated our value proposition to adjustable garden pots made from 100% recyclable materials. This defines the product as well as identifies how we are addressing the wicked problem. So now we've got our value proposition, we'll move on to the remaining 8 building blocks. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of these very quickly, as it would take too long to go through all of them. So customer segments, so educational and vocational platforms, and businesses and residents based in areas with very limited green space. So these would be our target customer segments. And our revenue streams, so our primary source of revenue will be from direct sales of the adjustable garden pots. And this will be further supported by marketing and advertising revenues generated from businesses with complementary goods or services to our product. You can take a read of the rest of them. And then our BMC underwent another iteration on the basis of feedback and research. So as part of this iteration process, and after listening and speaking to industry experts, we found that we needed to reduce our reliance on grant and loan funding given their lack of nimbleness. We have also decided to reduce our dependence on aged care facilities, as there would be too much uncertainty with regards to relying on volunteers. So, fundamental assumption that underpins our business model. Our initiative will be adopted by the target demographic based on that demographic's strong consciousness and empathy ensued by their views of climate change and household sustainability. In reaching our epistemological assumption, and subsequently, what are we trying to know, we arrived at our key research question. Is the level of public environmental consciousness sufficient to drive a change in perception on products made from recyclable materials? With the main research question in hand, the team began a literature review of scholarly articles, and the findings to date show factors that drive consumers to pay more for environmentally friendly products include demography, knowledge, values, psychology, and behaviour. And the notion of PCE, that is perceived consumer effectiveness, which measures the extent to which a consumer believes that his or her individual actions make a difference in the big scheme of things. Well, sheer concern for the environment or awareness of the environmental issues is not sufficient to motivate a change in customer behaviour. And in order to drive consumers to act in an environmentally conscious manner, it is necessary to improve the perception of the significance of individual actions and behaviours. This perception, although it may be influenced by customer demographics and political affiliation, would be what influences the attitudes towards environmentally friendly products. We also found psychographics appear to be more effective than demographics in explaining variation in consumer behaviour. And consumers will only pay a higher amount for products with positive social attributes when the functional attributes of these products meet their needs. So here's a high-level overview of the key assumptions for the remaining 8 building blocks as well. Once again, I'll only touch on a couple. I'll try and use the same ones as I spoke about in the previous slide. So customer segments. So our key assumptions here is that there is a demand in schools for programs centred around environmental consciousness. and that demographics and environmental awareness within inner suburban residents and businesses are adequate to ensure strong sales numbers. And the key assumptions for our revenue streams.
We have a main source of funding via sale of pots. Businesses with complementary products to ours will want to advertise on our site. And our secondary revenue streams would be via grant funding, given their lack of nimbleness. Given ontology is associated with a central question of whether social entities need to be perceived as objective or subjective, review of our fundamental assumption, which you may have gathered by our epistemological assumption in the earlier slide, is that it is underpinned by the subjective views, environmental consciousness, of social entities. As such, the research strategy adopted by our team is one of constructivism ontology. Under this ontology, we have employed an exploratory research strategy where primary data would be gathered using observations, survey, and interviews for our target segments, psychographics, demographics, and industry experts, and conducted via a cross-sectional time horizon dimension. We aim to use multiple units of analysis. The first stage will focus on individuals as units of analysis, and the second on social gardening groups. The time horizon undertaken will be observed under a cross-sectional study. This will allow us to obtain information on variables in different contexts, but at a single point in time. This diagram, which we kindly borrow from Dr. Cameron Duff's Philosophical Underpinnings of Research Design face-to-face presentation, is a great depiction of how our team progressed. Under this research cycle, which is not a linear flow, we have been moved back and forth between research design and literature review, and repeated this process and modified our research strategy and research design accordingly. Our research design approach was to develop sampling to collect data from a subset of individuals to capture a wider demographic without limiting and/or influencing on choices. The objective from the sampling is to draw inferences from the information gathered which would validate our key assumption. We would intend to collect data both online and face-to-face. Face-to-face methods will be done at local home and garden centres such as Bunnings or Mitre 10. We have done initial pilot testing, which consisted of a small sample of 50 family and friends taking the online survey. The survey was divided into 3 parts. The first part is aimed to measure behaviour towards the environment. The second part measures consumer attitudes towards the environment. And the third part measures consumer values towards green products. The second and third parts are adapted from our proposed BMC assumptions. The results from our pilot survey, which was completed by 50 respondents, show 84% of respondents would consider purchasing eco-friendly products to help reduce environmental effects. 76% were prepared to pay more for it. And respondents also showed a 20% increase in a change in recycling behaviour if collection bins were readily available. So, what did our research show us? Given the plethora of relevant literature review conducted as part of this business research design cycle, and further purported by the results of our pilot survey, we remain confident about the viability of the minimum viable product and the assumptions contained within the business model. It must be noted that despite the positive results, a big challenge with most surveys is the feedback integrity. Our research found that, while exploring green purchase behaviour, many studies have reported a discrepancy, or gap, between consumers' expressed favourable attitudes and actual purchasing practices. And whilst we acknowledge that the execution of the plan is outside the scope of the project, the next natural progression to validate our findings, pending the results of the survey, the Wicked Whisperers would set up pop-up stores in the areas that showed the highest levels of environmental consciousness and demand for our product. This would help us gauge the actual demand and test the viability of our business model. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation. The last 3 slides are references that you can pause and review in your own time.